Hello, everyone. I know many of you are listening to this while preparing for sleep. Before we begin, take a moment to notice where you are and what time it is for you right now. You don't need to type anything if you're already drifting off. And if you enjoy calm stories like this, you can gently support the channel by liking and subscribing. Whenever you feel comfortable, now, let the rain fade into the background and allow the story to unfold slowly. He was the kind of neighbor who waved every morning, watered other people's plants when they were on vacation, and never missed a community barbecue. He smiled easily, spoke softly, and always offered to help carry groceries. Parents felt safe letting their children walk past his house. Elderly residents said he was one of the good ones. That was why no one questioned him when his next-door neighbor, 34-year-old Claire Benton, suddenly disappeared. Claire lived alone and worked late shifts at a local insurance office. When she didn't show up for work on Monday, co-workers assumed she had taken a day off. By Wednesday, her phone still went straight to voicemail. On Friday, her sister drove in from another town and reported her missing. Police began with routine questions. Martin was among the first interviewed. He stood calmly on his porch, hands folded, speaking gently. "She was quiet," he said, kept to herself. "Nice woman. I hope she's okay." He even offered detectives coffee. Investigators searched Claire's apartment. Her purse was there, her phone charger was plugged in, her bed looked slept in. There were no signs of a struggle, just an eerie sense that she had walked out and never returned. Days passed. Flyers went up. Volunteers searched nearby parks and wooded areas. Martin joined the search every morning, wearing a bright vest and bringing bottled water for others. But something felt wrong. A detective reviewing neighborhood security footage noticed something strange. On the night Claire vanished, her car never left the street, yet a figure was seen walking from her driveway toward Martin's house around 11:40 p.m. The footage was blurry, but the walk looked deliberate. Police returned to Martin's home with more questions. This time, his smile lingered a little too long. He said he'd gone to bed early that night. Said he hadn't heard or seen anything unusual. But when asked why his outdoor lights were on at nearly midnight, he hesitated before answering. "It helps with security," he said. Detectives asked permission to look around his backyard. Martin agreed instantly, almost too quickly. The yard looked ordinary. Trimmed grass, a small shed, flower beds lining the fence. Nothing stood out at first, but one officer noticed an area where the soil looked newer than the rest. Darker, recently turned. Martin laughed nervously. "I was replanting some bushes. That explanation might have worked. If the soil hadn't sunk slightly under pressure." A cadaver dog was brought in later that afternoon. The dog alerted within seconds. What followed changed the entire neighborhood forever. Beneath just 3 feet of dirt, wrapped carefully in plastic, police found human remains. Identification confirmed what everyone feared. It was Claire. The quiet street erupted in shock. Neighbors cried, some screamed. Others stood frozen, staring at the house they had trusted for years. Martin was arrested on the spot. During interrogation, his calm finally cracked. Detectives revealed that Claire had confronted him days earlier after discovering he had been secretly entering her home using a copied key. Security footage from a hardware store showed him duplicating it weeks before. What began as harmless watching, he later admitted, turned into obsession. On the night she confronted him, an argument escalated. What happened next, he claimed, was an accident. But evidence told a darker story: planning, concealment, and chilling patience. At trial, neighbors testified about his friendliness, his helpfulness, his smile. Prosecutors called it a mask. The jury took less than 3 hours to return a verdict: guilty. Martin Hale was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Today, Willow Crescent looks peaceful again. Lawns are trimmed, children ride bikes, new families live in Claire's old home. But longtime residents say they still remember the lesson they learned the hard way. Sometimes the most dangerous person on the street is the one who smiles the most. At 2:17 a.m., the emergency dispatcher heard a woman whisper, "Please, I think someone is in my house." Her voice was shaking, barely louder than her breathing. The call came from a quiet suburban address, the kind of place where nothing ever made the news. The dispatcher asked her name. She said it softly. "Rachel Moore, age 29. "What's happening right now?" the dispatcher asked. I hear footsteps, Rachel whispered. I locked my bedroom door. I think he's downstairs. The dispatcher immediately sent officers and told her to stay on the line. Rachel said she was hiding in her closet, her phone pressed tightly to her chest. Then came a sound, faint but unmistakable, a slow creak. The dispatcher asked, Rachel, can you still hear me? There was a pause. Then a sharp inhale. He's calling my name, Rachel whispered. The line went silent. Dispatch tried calling back. No answer. Police arrived 6 minutes later. The front door was unlocked. The lights were on. The house was perfectly still. They searched room by room. No intruder. No sign of forced entry. Rachel was not there. Her phone, however, was found on the closet floor, screen cracked, still connected to the emergency call log. Her purse sat neatly on the kitchen counter. Her car was parked outside. It was as if she had vanished in the middle of a sentence. The case exploded across the media. The silent 911 call became a headline nationwide. Friends described Rachel as cautious, responsible, and afraid of being alone at night. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Evan Cole, after what she described as controlling behavior. Police questioned Evan the next morning. He appeared cooperative, calm, almost rehearsed. He said he had been home all night, asleep. His phone location supported his claim, or so it seemed. But investigators noticed something strange. His phone had gone into airplane mode for exactly 47 minutes during the time of the 911 call. When asked why, Evan said his battery was dying. Detectives weren't convinced. They re-examined the 911 audio using enhanced software. Beneath the static, they detected something chilling. A faint male voice in the background, low and close to the microphone. It wasn't calling her name. It was correcting her. Don't say that. Forensics also found partial shoe impressions near the back door, wiped but not completely erased. The tread pattern matched a rare brand Evan owned. Still, there was no body. No blood. No direct proof. Weeks passed. Then months. Rachel's parents refused to give up. They pushed police to search a wooded construction site near Evan's workplace, a place he visited often for late-night walks. Cadaver dogs alerted near a shallow patch of ground covered with loose gravel. Buried beneath was a suitcase. Inside were Rachel's remains. The evidence finally came together. Cell tower data showed Evan's phone reconnecting near that exact location minutes after the 911 call ended. Fibers from the suitcase matched ones in his car trunk, and neighbors reported hearing a vehicle leave Rachel's driveway shortly after police were first dispatched. Confronted with the evidence, Evan broke. He admit. He had copied Rachel's spare key months earlier. That night, he came to talk. When she tried to call for help, he panicked. The jury needed less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Evan Cole was sentenced to life in prison. Today, Rachel's 911 call is used in dispatcher training programs across the country, a haunting reminder of how fast danger can unfold, and how every second matters. The final words on that recording still echo in the courtroom archives. Please, he's here. And then, silence. To everyone who knew them, Daniel and Laura Whitman were the definition of a perfect couple. They hosted dinner parties, took smiling vacation photos, posted anniversary messages that sounded like movie lines. Daniel was polite, successful, and soft-spoken. Laura often joked that she had won the husband lottery. So when Laura suddenly stopped answering calls, no one imagined the truth waiting behind the walls of their beautiful home. It started with a wellness check. Laura's sister hadn't heard from her in 4 days. Texts were unread. Calls went straight to voicemail. When police arrived at the Whitman house, Daniel opened the door calmly, dressed neatly, coffee mug in hand. She's visiting a friend, he said without hesitation. She needed space. Officers asked for a name. Daniel paused. Just a little too long. I'm not sure which one, he replied. Inside, the house looked spotless, almost staged. No mess. No signs of a struggle. Laura's purse sat on a chair. Her phone was missing. Her car was still in the garage. Daniel explained that she'd left in a rideshare, but there was no record of one. Detectives began quietly digging into Daniel's background. At work, co-workers described him as meticulous, controlling. someone who hated unpredictability, someone who needed things just right. Neighbors mentioned something stranger. Daniel had renovated the basement himself months earlier. He refused to let anyone see it. Even when contractors offered help, he declined. Said it was private workspace. That word stuck with investigators. They returned with a warrant. Daniel remained calm as officers descended into the basement. At first it looked ordinary. Freshly painted walls, new shelving, spotless concrete floors. Too clean. Too intentional. Then an officer noticed airflow coming from behind a storage rack. They moved it. Behind it was a narrow door flush with the wall, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. The room beyond was small, soundproofed, and windowless. Inside were restraints mounted to the wall, a chair bolted to the floor, sound-dampening foam, and a camera mounted high in the corner. The silence in the house turned heavy. Forensic teams swept the room. Traces of Laura's DNA were found on the restraints, on the floor, on the drain built into the concrete. But Laura herself was still missing. Daniel was taken in for questioning. At first he denied everything, claimed the room was for personal projects. When shown the evidence, his tone changed. His voice flattened. The charm disappeared. Investigators confronted him with security footage recovered from a hidden hard drive. It showed Laura entering the basement days earlier, the door closing behind her. She never came back out. Under pressure, Daniel finally spoke. He said he had built the room to keep things under control. Said Laura had been pulling away. Said he only wanted to talk, to make her listen. When she tried to leave, he panicked. What happened next, he called a mistake. Police later found Laura's remains sealed inside a concealed concrete cavity beneath the basement floor. A section poured after her disappearance. The case shocked the entire community. Friends replayed memories, searching for warning signs, smiles that now felt fake, compliments that felt rehearsed. The perfect husband persona collapsed completely under scrutiny. At trial, prosecutors showed photos of the hidden room, the blueprints, the recordings. They described months of planning, control, and deception. Daniel showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Today, the Whitman house stands empty. The basement has been sealed by authorities. Realtors refuse to list it. Neighbors say the air around it feels heavy. People still drive by slowly, staring at the quiet windows. Because the most terrifying part wasn't the hidden room. It was how long no one suspected the man who built it. When 17-year-old Maya Lopez didn't come home after school, her mother assumed the bus was late. By nightfall, worry crept in. Maya was responsible. She always texted, always answered. When her phone went straight to voicemail, her mother drove the usual route home from school, checking parks, stores, and bus stops. Nothing. By midnight, police were called. At first, officers treated it as a possible runaway. Teenagers left sometimes. But that theory began to collapse almost immediately. Maya had left her backpack in her locker. Her wallet was still in her bedroom, her passport untouched. She had plans that weekend. She had been excited about them. She hadn't planned to disappear. The first real clue came the next morning. A maintenance worker cleaning a vacant lot, 2 miles from Maya's school, found something blackened near a drainage ditch. It was a phone, badly burned, warped from heat. The serial number matched Maya's. Detectives now treated the case as a possible abduction. Phone records showed Maya's last signal pinged near a convenience store close to her school. Surveillance footage showed her walking alone, texting, then stopping near the sidewalk as a car slowed beside her. The VID. O was grainy, but one detail stood out. The car was familiar. It belonged to Ethan Brooks, a 22-year-old college student who lived in the same neighborhood. He had once tutored Maya in math. Her parents knew him, trusted him. When questioned, Ethan said he hadn't seen Maya in weeks, claimed his car hadn't been running that day, said he'd spent the afternoon gaming at home, but detectives noticed burn marks on the backseat floor of his car. He said he'd spilled chemicals while cleaning. Then came the contradiction. A traffic camera captured Ethan's car driving past the same vacant lot where the phone was found. At 4:12 p.m., just minutes after Maya vanished, his alibi began to unravel. Police obtained a search warrant. Inside Ethan's garage, they found a metal barrel containing ash and melted plastic. Forensic analysis confirmed traces of lithium battery residue consistent with a smartphone. Mixed within the ash were tiny fragments of glass matching Maya's phone screen. Still, there was no sign of Maya herself. Investigators pressed harder. They searched Ethan's computer and uncovered deleted messages between him and Maya. She had recently told him she wanted to stop talking, that she felt uncomfortable, that she planned to tell someone. The tone of his replies shifted sharply after that. "You're overreacting. You owe me an explanation. Don't make this difficult." During a second interrogation, detectives confronted Ethan with the digital evidence. His confidence cracked. He asked for water, then a lawyer, then silence, but one lie remained standing. Until it didn't. Cell tower data showed his phone traveling to a remote construction site late the night Maya disappeared. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. Beneath a shallow patch of freshly disturbed soil, investigators found what they had feared: Maya's body. The evidence told a clear story. She had been lured into the car under the pretense of talking things out. When she tried to leave, panic turned into violence. The burned phone was an attempt to erase the timeline. The lies were meant to buy time. They didn't. At trial, prosecutors dismantled Ethan's story piece by piece. The jury watched surveillance footage, read the messages, and heard experts explain the phone data. Ethan showed little emotion as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison. Today, a small memorial sits near Maya's school. Flowers, photos, handwritten notes from classmates who still remember her laugh. Her mother speaks at missing person awareness events now, repeating the same message every time: pay attention to the small lies. They're usually hiding something much bigger. When the Parkers hired Lena Brooks, they thought they had found the perfect babysitter. She was 19, polite, soft-spoken, and came highly recommended by a neighbor. She arrived early, cleaned up without being asked, and always sent cheerful update texts. Their 2-year-old son Noah seemed calm around her. Everything felt safe, too safe. For months, nothing seemed wrong. Then one evening, Mrs. Parker noticed something small but unsettling. Noah, usually excited to see Lena, began crying whenever she arrived. He clung to his mother's leg, shaking his head, refusing to let go. "Kids go through phases," Lena laughed lightly. "He's probably tired." The parents wanted to believe her, but the behavior worsened. Noah stopped sleeping through the night. He flinched at sudden movements. He cried whenever left alone in a room. Concern turned into fear. Quietly, without accusing anyone, Mr. Parker installed a small security camera in the living room, telling no one. It was positioned to look like part of a smoke detector. 2 days later, they checked the footage. At first, everything looked normal. Lena sat on the couch scrolling on her phone while Noah played on the floor. Minutes passed. Then her expression changed. She looked directly toward the camera and smiled. What followed made the parents physically sick. Lena stood up, shut the curtains, and moved just out of frame with the child. Audio still recorded. Her voice dropped, cold, sharp, nothing like the cheerful tone she used with adults. "Stop crying," she said. There was a loud thump. Then silence. A moment later, Noah began sobbing. The footage continued. She re-entered the frame, adjusting her shirt, checking her phone, acting calm again. When the parents returned home later that evening, Lena greeted them with her usual smile. "How was he today?" Mrs. Parker asked. "Perfect," Lena replied. That night, the parents went straight to the police. Detectives reviewed the footage and immediately opened an investigation. Lena was arrested the next morning without incident. During questioning, she denied everything, claiming the video was taken out of context. But more evidence surfaced quickly. A forensic review of her phone revealed disturbing messages sent to a friend, complaints about children being annoying, too loud, and deserving discipline. Investigators also discovered she had been fired from a previous babysitting job, information she had never disclosed. That family had never installed cameras. Medical professionals examined Noah and confirmed signs consistent with repeated mistreatment over time. When confronted with the evidence, Lena broke down. She admitted she lost control when the child cried. She claimed she never meant serious harm. Prosecutors disagreed. At trial, the jury watched the footage in silence. Some jurors looked away. Others wiped their eyes. The defense argued stress and inexperience. The prosecution argued trust and betrayal. The verdict came quickly. We. LTI. Lena Brooks was sentenced to a lengthy prison term and permanently barred from working with children. The Parkers later spoke publicly not to seek attention, but to warn others. They urged parents to trust their instincts, to listen when something feels off, and to remember that danger doesn't always look frightening at first. Sometimes it smiles politely, shows up on time and says, "Everything went great today." When local news producer Carla Jensen booked Thomas Reed for an interview, she thought she had struck gold. A quiet suburban father volunteering to speak about his missing wife? Viewers loved those stories. Emotional, personal, relatable. Emily Reed had vanished 3 weeks earlier. Her car was found abandoned near a shopping plaza. No blood, no signs of struggle, just a purse on the passenger seat and keys still in the ignition. Thomas had been cooperative from the beginning. Calm, soft-spoken, almost too composed. He told police the same story every time. They'd argued the night before. She left to cool off. Never came back. The interview was meant to help keep attention on the case. Instead, it ended it. The segment aired live at 6 p.m. Thomas sat under studio lights, hands folded, eyes damp but controlled. The anchor asked gentle questions. "What do you want people to know about Emily?" He swallowed. She was strong, independent. She didn't like feeling trapped. The anchor nodded. "When was the last time you saw her?" Thomas answered without hesitation. "Tuesday night. Around 9:40. She stormed out after we argued." The anchor paused. Police reports said Emily was last seen at 8:15 p.m. when her car was captured on a traffic camera. No witness had ever mentioned 9:40. The control room noticed immediately. So did the detectives watching, at home. The anchor continued carefully. "You're sure about the time?" Thomas blinked. "Just once. Yes, because I remember checking the clock. I was washing dishes when she left." That single sentence changed everything. Police had never released a time window publicly. They had also never mentioned the argument happening that late. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, detectives were on the phone. They pulled Thomas back in for questioning that night. At first, he tried to explain it away. Said he misspoke. Said stress made him confused. But the more he talked, the more details spilled out. Details only someone present would know. When asked why he mentioned washing dishes, investigators showed him photos. The sink had been dry when officers first entered the house the morning after Emily vanished. No soap, no water, no dishes. But in the garage trash bin they had found a wet sponge sealed inside a bag. Thomas went quiet. Then came the digital evidence. His phone location placed him not at home, but near a remote riverbank late that night, the same location where Emily's phone signal had briefly reappeared before dying completely. Search teams were sent to the area. 2 days later, they found her. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide. Time of death aligned closely with the window Thomas had accidentally revealed on live television. During a second interview, detectives played the clip back for him. "You told the world something only the killer would know," one detective said calmly. Thomas stared at the screen. His face collapsed. He whispered, "I didn't mean to say that. That was the closest thing to a confession he ever gave." At trial, prosecutors replayed the interview again and again. Jurors watched as the timeline unraveled in real time. How one careless sentence shattered months of lies. The defense argued coincidence, stress, misremembering. The jury didn't believe it. Thomas Reed was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The interview clip still circulates in journalism schools today. A case study in how truth sometimes slips out when someone least expects it. One sentence, one mistake, broadcast live, and a crime hidden in silence suddenly exposed to the world. For 2 decades, the town of Ridgeway prided itself on being quiet. No murders, no scandals, just one main road, a diner everyone loved, and neighbors who had known each other forever. People left their doors unlocked. Kids rode bikes past sunset. Outsiders called it peaceful, but peace can be carefully maintained. In 2003, 20-year-old Hannah Miller vanished after finishing her shift at the local grocery store. She told a coworker she was heading home. She never arrived. Her car was found the next morning parked neatly near the edge of town. Keys inside. No signs of damage, no blood, no struggle. Police searched for weeks. Volunteers combed fields and woods. Flyers covered every pole. Her parents begged for answers. None came. Eventually, the case went cold. People stopped talking about Hannah, then they stopped saying her name at all. Years passed. New families moved in, old ones stayed quiet. Ridgeway carried on, polite, smiling, untouched by tragedy on the surface, until a storm changed everything. In the spring of 2023, heavy rain caused a partial collapse near an abandoned shed behind the old grain mill. A utility worker noticed something unusual in the exposed soil and called police. What they uncovered stunned the entire county: human remains, carefully wrapped, buried deep, preserved by the cool earth. Dental records confirmed what few still dared to wonder. It was Hannah Miller. The discovery reopened a case many believed would never be solved. Detectives began re-interviewing residents, some for the first time in 20 years. People were older now, tired, less careful with their words. Patterns began to emerge. Multiple townspeople remembered seeing Hannah arguing with someone the night she disappeared. Not a stranger, someone local, someone trusted. A name kept surfacing quietly, reluctantly. Mark Ellison. Mark had been a volunteer firefighter, a youth baseball coach, a man known for helping anyone in need. Back in 2003, he had helped organize search parties for Hannah. He'd even spoken at a vigil. But records showed something overlooked. Back then, Mark had been the last person to clock out at the grocery store the same night as Hannah. Security footage from that era was long gone. But new forensic methods reopened old evidence. Investigators tested fibers found on Hannah's jacket, fibers that couldn't be analyzed properly 20 years earlier. They matched fabric from a work jacket Mark still owned. Then came the testimony. A woman who had moved away years ago contacted police after seeing news of the discovery. She said Mark once confessed something while drunk at a party in 2004. He said the town would never turn on him, she recalled, because they needed him too much. Detectives searched Mark's old property with ground-penetrating radar. They found disturbed soil matching the original burial site, evidence suggesting Hannah's body had been moved years after her death. Confronted with the new findings, Mark denied everything, but pressure mounted. Phone records from 2003 showed a late-night call between him and Hannah minutes before she vanished. Something police had missed before. During a final interview, after hours of questioning, his confidence cracked. He muttered, almost to himself, "It was supposed to stay buried." That sentence sealed the case. Mark Ellison was arrested and charged with murder. At trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture. A trusted man who used his reputation to hide in plain sight. A town that didn't want to believe evil could live among them. And a young woman whose voice had been silenced for 20 years. The jury deliberated less than a day. Guilty. Today, Ridgeway is quieter than ever. Not peaceful, just quieter. People lock their doors now. They talk more carefully. And when newcomers ask why the old grain mill fence is still standing, locals give short answers, because some secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait. When Natalie Brooks clocked out of her evening shift at the downtown pharmacy, she sent her usual text to her sister. Headed home. She never made it. Natalie was 26, dependable, routine-driven and careful. She always walked the same route, always checked in, always answered her phone. When midnight came and her messages went unread, her sister called police. At first, officers believed it might be a delay or a dead phone. But by morning, concern turned into urgency. Natalie's car was still parked in the employee lot. Her purse was inside, her jacket hung on the back of her chair at work. It looked as if she had stepped outside for a moment and never returned. Security footage showed Natalie leaving the pharmacy at 9:42 p.m. She walked toward the side exit, phone in hand, typing. Just before she disappeared from frame, a man stepped into view from behind a delivery truck. The camera angle was too poor to show his face. Only one detail stood out clearly. He was holding a white paper coffee cup. Detectives canvassed nearby businesses. Most were closed at that hour. One cafe 3 blocks away had been open late that night. The manager confirmed they had sold only one drink after 9:30 p.m. A black coffee, paid for in cash. The receipt was still in the register, time-stamped, 9:38 p.m. Printed at the bottom was a loyalty number, used automatically when customers forgot their card. Police traced it. The number belonged to Evan Miller, a night shift security guard who worked in the same commercial complex as Natalie. Evan told detectives he bought coffee every night, said it meant nothing, claimed he went straight to work afterward. But his times didn't add up. His badge logs showed he didn't clock in until nearly 11 p.m. When asked where he was in between, he shrugged. Driving around. Clearing my head. Investigators searched his car. Inside the trunk they found a pair of work gloves still damp from cleaning. A faint chemical smell lingered. Forensic testing later revealed traces of cleaning solvent, and fibers matching Natalie's clothing. Still, there was no body. Days turned into weeks. Public pressure grew. Vigils were held. Flyers spread across the city. Then a maintenance crew cleaning a drainage culvert on the edge of town found something tangled in debris. A purse. Natalie's, nearby, partially hidden under overgrowth. Search teams found more evidence. Enough to confirm what everyone feared. The investigation turned from missing person to homicide. Detectives confronted Evan again, this time with the receipt, the badge data, the fiber matches, and traffic camera footage showing his car near the culvert shortly after 10 p.m. His calm cracked. He admitted he had approached Natalie, claiming he just wanted to talk. He said she tried to walk away. He panicked. What happened next he called an accident. Prosecutors disagreed. At trial, the receipt became the centerpiece of the case. A single slip of paper, something meant to be thrown away, had silently recorded the timeline no one could argue with. The jury took less than 4 hours. Guilty. Evan Miller was sentenced to life in prison. Today, Natalie's co-workers keep her photo near the break room clock. Her sister speaks publicly about trusting small details and pushing for answers. Because in this case, justice didn't come from a confession. It came from a forgotten receipt, the one thing the killer never thought would matter. Pastor Jonathan Hale was the kind of man people trusted without question. He preached every Sunday with calm authority. He remembered birthdays. He visited the sick. He counseled couples in crisis. In the small town of Brookfield, his word carried weight. So when Lena Carter, a 24-year-old church volunteer, suddenly disappeared, no one connected her name to his. At first, Lena had been helping with youth outreach and late-night event planning. She was responsible, deeply involved, and rarely missed a message. When she didn't show up for rehearsal one evening, friends assumed she was sick. By the next morning, her phone was still off. Her roommate filed a missing person report. Police began routine interviews, including church staff. Pastor Hale spoke calmly, hands folded, voice gentle. She was dedicated, he said, always willing to help. I'll pray for her safe return. But detectives noticed something odd. Lena's last known location pinged near the church, just after midnight. That didn't make sense. The building was supposed to be locked by 10 p.m. Security footage from nearby businesses showed a car pulling into the church lot at 11:47 p.m. The camera couldn't capture the driver clearly, but the vehicle matched Pastor Hale's sedan. When questioned, he said he often came late at night to prepare sermons in peace. That explanation raised concern. Investigators obtained a warrant to search the church. Inside, everything looked normal. Pews aligned, candles untouched, office tidy. But in the basement storage area, they found something disturbing. Cleaning supplies still wet, gloves in the trash, and a faint chemical odor lingering in the air. More troubling was what they found behind a locked utility room. Scratches on the concrete floor, a drain recently scrubbed, and traces of blood date. See table only with forensic testing. The DNA matched Lena. The news stunned the town. People who had grown up under Pastor Hale's guidance refused to believe it. Some said it was a setup, others claimed persecution. But evidence continued to pile up. Phone records revealed dozens of late-night messages from Hale to Lena. messages that shifted from spiritual guidance to possessive and personal. When she tried to set boundaries, the tone changed. The final message she sent read, "Please stop contacting me, I'm uncomfortable." Her phone went dark less than an hour later. Detectives also discovered Hale had installed a private lock system inside the church office, one not approved by the board. Access logs showed it was used the night Lena vanished. Confronted with the evidence, Hale finally spoke. He claimed Lena came to talk, claimed she was emotional, claimed things got out of control. He never explained why he cleaned the floor, or why he lied. Search teams later located Lena's remains in a wooded area miles from town, wrapped in plastic and hidden beneath fallen branches. The trial divided the community. Some church members refused to attend. Others sat in shock as prosecutors laid out the timeline, the messages, the footage, the forensic trail. The jury reached a verdict after 2 days. Guilty. Jonathan Hale was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The church closed within a year. Today, its doors remain locked, the sign faded, the bells silent. Residents say the hardest part wasn't learning that evil existed among them. It was realizing how easily it had worn the face of faith. Officer Daniel Ruiz expected nothing more than paperwork when he pulled over the gray sedan just after midnight. The vehicle had a broken tail light, a routine stop on an empty highway outside the city. The driver slowed quickly and pulled over without hesitation. No resistance. No attitude. Too calm. The man behind the wheel identified himself as Gregory Vance, age 38. His hands rested neatly on the steering wheel. His voice was polite, controlled. "Sorry about the light, officer. I'll get it fixed." Ruiz noticed the smell first. Not alcohol, not drugs, but something faint and metallic. Hard to place. The back seat was empty, except for a folded blanket and a duffel bag. "Where are you headed tonight?" Ruiz asked. "Just driving," Vance replied. "Helps me think." The answer was vague, but not illegal. Still, something felt off. Ruiz ran the license, clean record, no warrants. But when he returned to the window, he saw something that made his stomach tighten. There were scratches on Vance's forearms, thin, red, uneven lines. "Work injury?" Ruiz asked. Vance smiled. "Cat." Ruiz asked him to step out of the vehicle. As protocol, Ruiz ran a flashlight through the interior again. This time, he noticed dark stains on the edge of the trunk lining. Not fresh, but not old either. "Mind opening the trunk?" he asked. For the first time, Vance hesitated. "It's kind of messy," he said. Ruiz didn't move. Just waited. Slowly, Vance pressed the button. Inside were cleaning supplies, plastic sheeting, gloves, and rope. Everything neatly packed. Too neatly. Ruiz called for backup. While waiting, he asked simple questions. Where he worked, where he lived, why he was out so late. Vance answered smoothly, but his story shifted slightly each time. When backup arrived, officers conducted a deeper search. Inside the duffel bag, they found a wallet. It didn't belong to Gregory Vance. The ID inside belonged to a woman reported missing 3 weeks earlier, Elena Park. The stop turned into an arrest. At the station, detectives began connecting dots. Elena Park wasn't the only missing person in the area. There were 3 others over the past 2 years, all women. All last seen late at night, all near highways. Vance had never been on their radar. Until now. A search warrant for his home revealed a hidden storage space behind the garage wall. Inside were personal belongings, jewelry, phones, driver's licenses, and clothing. Each carefully labeled with dates. Forensic testing linked him to multiple crime scenes. Soil from his boots matched remote dumping locations. Fibers from his car matched fibers found on victims. The case exploded into national headlines. During interrogation, Vance remained eerily calm. He spoke in a flat tone, referring to victims as mistakes and phases. He never showed anger, never raised his voice. When asked how many people he had killed, he paused. "More than you found," he said. Search teams uncovered 2 additional burial sites based on his partial directions. Families finally received answers they had waited years for. At trial, prosecutors laid out the evidence step by step. The traffic stop, the trunk, the wallet, the hidden room, the patterns. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Gregory Vance was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. Officer Ruiz later said the stop haunted him. "If I'd let him go," he told reporters, "he would have done it again." Today, the stretch of highway where the stop occurred looks ordinary. Cars pass. Lights flicker. Nothing marks the moment when a routine decision stopped a serial killer. But in police training rooms across the country, the case is still taught. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest details save lives. When Olivia Grant sent her final text message, no one thought it would become the key to solving her murder. The message was simple. "If anything happens to me, check his phone." She sent it to her best friend at 9:14 p.m. 20 minutes later, Olivia vanished. At first, police believed she had gone out to cool off after an argument. She was 28, independent, and known for disappearing for a day or two when overwhelmed. But this time felt different. Her apartment door was unlocked, her purse sat on the counter, her car was still in its parking space, and her phone was missing. Her best friend showed police the message the next morning. Detectives immediately treated the case as suspicious, not missing but dangerous. The text had been sent during a heated argument with Olivia's boyfriend, Ryan Keller, a freelance photographer she had dated for just under a year. When questioned, Ryan admitted they had argued that night, but insisted Olivia stormed out afterward. He claimed he had no idea where she went. But the text message changed everything. Police asked him directly, "Why would she tell someone to check your phone?" Ryan shrugged. "She was emotional. She liked drama." Investigators didn't agree. They obtained a warrant to examine Ryan's phone and cloud backups. What they found painted a very different picture. Deleted messages showed repeated controlling behavior, checking Olivia's location, questioning who she spoke to, accusing her of cheating. The tone escalated over time. The last unsent draft message on Olivia's phone was even more alarming. "You're scaring me. Please stop." Cell tower data placed Ryan's phone at Olivia's apartment minutes after her last text, despite his claim that he never went there. Surveillance footage from a nearby building showed a man matching his height and build, entering her apartment hallway just after 9:20 p.m. He didn't leave until nearly an hour later. Still, there was no body. Days passed. Public pressure mounted. Vigils were held. Olivia's parents pleaded for answers. Then a breakthrough came from an unlikely place. A phone repair technician contacted police after recognizing Ryan's name from the N.U.'s. Months earlier, Ryan had brought in a phone with a cracked screen, asking if deleted data could be permanently wiped. That phone matched the model Olivia owned. Police searched a wooded area near Ryan's childhood home after analyzing GPS artifacts tied to his cloud account. There, buried beneath leaves and stones, they found Olivia. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide. Confronted with the evidence, Ryan finally spoke. He claimed the argument got out of hand, said he only meant to scare her, said he panicked afterward. Prosecutors played Olivia's final text in court, projected large and silent on a screen. "If anything happens to me, check his phone." That sentence became the backbone of the entire case. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. Guilty. Ryan Keller was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Today, Olivia's family shares her story to raise awareness about digital warning signs in abusive relationships. They remind others to take messages like hers seriously, because sometimes a single text can speak louder than any witness ever could. No one in the apartment complex noticed Evan Rowe. That was the strange part. He lived on the 3rd floor, paid rent on time, never argued, never had visitors. He nodded politely in the hallway, kept his head down, and spoke so softly people often asked him to repeat himself. When residents described him later, they all said the same thing. Quiet, normal, forgettable. That's why no one questioned it when he volunteered to help search for 3 different missing women over the course of 5 years. The first was Tara Lynn, a college student who disappeared after walking home from her night class. Flyers went up. Candlelight vigils were held. Evan showed up to every one. The second was Maria Santos, a nurse who vanished after a late shift. Again, Evan helped distribute posters. He even offered to print more at his office. The third was Jenna Price, a delivery driver who never returned home one night. By then, fear had spread through the neighborhood. But no one suspected Evan. He lived closest to all three women. That fact only became important years later. When a new detective, Lena Walsh, was assigned to review cold cases, she noticed something strange. Every missing person poster in the evidence box had fingerprints on it. One set appeared on nearly all of them. The prints belonged to Evan Rowe. At first it seemed harmless. He had helped with searches after all. But when Walsh mapped the disappearances, a pattern emerged. Each woman had last been seen within 2 blocks of Evan's apartment. Each vanished late at night. Each lived alone. Still, there was no physical evidence, until a plumbing complaint changed everything. A pipe burst in the basement storage area of Evan's building. Maintenance workers reported a foul odor coming from behind a locked storage cage registered to him. Police were called. Inside the unit were boxes stacked neatly, labeled by year. Personal items filled them: purses, phones, jewelry, ID cards, all belonging to missing women. Behind the boxes was a sealed section of wall that hadn't appeared on the original building plans. When it was opened, investigators found a hidden crawlspace. Inside were human remains. The discovery stunned the city. DNA testing confirmed victims from multiple unsolved cases spanning nearly a decade. Evan was arrested that evening while calmly eating dinner alone. During questioning, he showed no emotion. He spoke slowly, politely, correcting detectives on small details. "They trusted me," he said quietly. "People always do." He admitted he followed neighborhood news closely, attending searches to feel close to the attention. He kept the posters because he liked seeing his work displayed publicly. Each trial drew national attention. Prosecutors laid out timelines, fingerprint matches, fiber evidence, and GPS data showing Evan's phone near every disappearance. Witnesses testified about seeing him walking with the victims late at night, often offering help or directions. The courtroom fell silent when detectives displayed the posters, each one bearing his fingerprints. The jury deliberated less than 1 day, guilty on all counts. Evan Rowe was sentenced to multiple life sentences without parole. After his arrest, residents realized something chilling. They had passed him every day, held doors open for him, thanked him for helping, smiled back when he smiled. The posters he helped hang were warnings, and he had been standing right beside them the whole time. When Samantha Reed didn't show up for her morning shift at the dental clinic, her coworkers assumed she was sick. By noon, her phone was still off. By evening, her sister was at the police station. Samantha was reliable, organized, and cautious. She never disappeared without telling someone. Her car was found parked outside her apartment, locked, with her purse still inside. Her keys were missing. Detectives quickly focused on the last person known to see her alive, her boyfriend of 8 months, Caleb Moore. Caleb told police a clean, confident story. They had dinner together the night before, watched a movie, argued a little. Then, he said, he left around 9:30 p.m. to meet friends at a sports bar across town. He even named 2 people who could confirm it. At first, his story seemed solid. His friends backed him up. The bartender remembered seeing him. Security footage showed him entering the bar at 9:52 p.m. Case closed? Not even close. A detective reviewing the footage noticed something strange. Caleb entered the bar alone, but never ordered a drink. He sat near the back, checked his phone repeatedly. Stay. Ed less than 15 minutes and left. That wasn't normal behavior for someone supposedly hanging out all night. Then came the first crack. Phone data showed Caleb's phone near Samantha's apartment at 10:18 p.m., nearly an hour after he claimed to have left her place for good. When questioned, Caleb said his phone must have glitched. Investigators didn't buy it. They examined the apartment again and found faint drag marks on the bedroom carpet, barely visible unless viewed at an angle. In the bathroom drain, forensic teams recovered traces of blood too small to see with the naked eye. DNA confirmed it belonged to Samantha. Now police knew what they were dealing with, but where was her body? The answer came from a mistake Caleb never realized he made. During his interview, he casually mentioned something odd. She always hated the smell of gasoline. Detectives froze. That detail had never been released. Investigators rewatched surveillance footage from a gas station near Caleb's house. At 2:11 a.m., his car pulled in. He filled a red gas can, not his tank. Then he drove toward an undeveloped construction zone on the edge of town. Search teams followed the trail. Behind a row of concrete barriers, partially concealed by debris, they found disturbed soil. Beneath it lay Samantha's body, wrapped in plastic and doused with fuel. The autopsy confirmed she had died hours before Caleb ever went to the bar. His alibi, carefully rehearsed, had only been meant to buy time. When confronted with the gas station footage and phone data, Caleb's confidence collapsed. He tried to revise his story, then blamed stress, then claimed it was an accident. The jury didn't believe him. Prosecutors showed the timeline step by step, the fake alibi, the planted witnesses, the phone pings, the gasoline purchase, and the detail he never should have known. After 6 hours of deliberation, verdict came back, guilty. Caleb Moore was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Samantha's family speaks to law students and investigators about how lies unravel, not because criminals talk too much, but because they talk wrong. One careless detail, one sentence that didn't fit, and the truth finally had a way in. When Laura Bennett was found at the bottom of her staircase, everyone assumed the same thing. A fall. She was 34, healthy, and lived alone in a quiet townhouse. The stairs were narrow and steep. Accidents happened. Even the first responding officers thought it was tragic but simple. Her boyfriend, Mark Ellis, stood nearby in shock, repeating the same sentence over and over. She slipped. I heard the thud and ran down. He said they had argued earlier, but nothing serious. Just stress, work, life. The paramedics pronounced Laura dead at the scene. Case closed. Almost. But the medical examiner hesitated. Laura's injuries didn't fully match a fall. Yes, her neck was broken. Yes, there was blunt force trauma. But there were also deep bruises on her upper arms, shaped like fingers, grip marks. That changed everything. The case was reclassified as suspicious. Detectives returned to the house and began a deeper examination. The staircase had no scuff marks consistent with a sudden slip, no displaced rug, no spilled items, no signs of her trying to catch herself. But there were faint marks on the wall near the top of the stairs, as if someone had been pressed there. Mark was called back in. This time, investigators asked more direct questions. He said Laura had been emotional, said she lost her balance, said he tried to grab her but failed. Then he added something strange. She screamed right before she fell. That detail hadn't been released. No one had mentioned a scream. Detectives exchanged looks. They checked Laura's phone. In the hours before her death, she had searched phrases like, signs of controlling behavior, how to leave safely, can emotional abuse turn violent? There were unsent messages in her drafts folder addressed to her sister. If something happens to me, please look at Mark. Investigators also pulled text history between Laura and Mark. The tone shifted sharply over time, from affectionate to possessive. Where are you? Why didn't you answer? You don't get to ignore me. Neighbors were interviewed next. One neighbor reported hearing raised voices the night Laura died. Another said they heard a loud bang, followed by silence. Security footage from across the street showed Mark pacing on the front porch minutes after the estimated time of death, repeatedly checking his phone. The autopsy report delivered the final blow to his story. The medical examiner concluded Laura's injuries were inconsistent with an accidental fall. The bruising on her arms indicated she had been forcibly restrained. The angle of the neck fracture suggested force applied before the fall. In short, she had been pushed. When confronted with the autopsy results, Mark's story changed again. He claimed he lost control for a moment, said they were arguing, said he didn't mean for her to die. Prosecutors didn't need more. At trial, the courtroom was silent as the medical examiner explained how the body told a different story than the one Mark tried to sell. Photos of the staircase, diagrams of the injuries, and Laura's final search history were shown to the jury. Her sister testified through tears, describing Laura's growing fear and her plans to leave. The defense argued it was a tragic accident. The jury disagreed. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Mark Ellis was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. Laura's case later became part of training material for forensic pathology students. A reminder that bodies don't lie even when people do. What looked like a simple fall had hidden a violent truth, and without one careful autopsy, it would have stayed buried forever. The Carter family looked ordinary from the outside. Sunday dinners were a tradition. Roast chicken, quiet conversation, polite laughter. Neighbors often saw all four of them together. Robert, his wife Elaine, and their two adult children, Megan and Luke. So when police cars filled the driveway one Sunday night, the neighborhood froze. It started with a 911 call at 8:42 p.m. A shaky male voice said, "Something's wrong." My wife collapsed at the table. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Elaine Carter was slumped in her chair, unresponsive. Plates of half-eaten food sat in front of everyone. Candles still burned. She was pronounced dead at the scene. At first it looked like a medical emergency. Elaine had complained of headaches in recent weeks. Stress maybe? Blood pressure? But then the paramedic noticed something strange. A faint, bitter smell on her breath, and slight discoloration around her lips. The medical examiner ordered a full toxicology screen. What came back shocked everyone. Elaine had died from acute poisoning. The dinner table instantly became a crime scene. Detectives questioned the family separately. Robert appeared devastated, repeating the same line. "We were just having dinner like always." Megan cried uncontrollably. Luke barely spoke. The meal had been prepared by Robert. He said it was one of Elaine's favorites. Chicken, vegetables, and homemade gravy. When asked if anything unusual happened, he shook his head. Nothing. She just collapsed. But investigators noticed something odd in the kitchen. On trash. A nearly empty container of industrial-strength pesticide. Robert claimed it was for ants in the garage, said he'd used it earlier that week. The problem was, lab results showed the poison in Elaine's system matched that exact product. Police searched the garage. They found the pesticide bottle wiped clean, no fingerprints. But in the kitchen drawer they found something Robert had missed. Disposable gloves, still faintly dusted with residue. Interviews continued. Megan revealed her parents had been fighting for months. Elaine had recently told her she was planning to leave and speak to a lawyer. She had also changed her will. That detail shifted everything. Financial records showed Robert had significant debt. Elaine controlled most of the assets. Investigators reconstructed the dinner minute by minute. Only one plate contained a high concentration of poison, Elaine's. The others were clean. Then came the final mistake. During a recorded interview, Robert said, "I only added a little. I didn't think it would kill her." The room went silent. He froze. Detectives looked up. "You added what?" one asked calmly. Robert tried to backtrack, stammering that he meant seasoning. But it was too late. The confession was on tape. At trial, prosecutors laid out the evidence. The poison, the gloves, the financial motive, the recorded statement. The defense argued panic, confusion, misunderstanding. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. Robert Carter was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The Carter home was sold months later. New owners renovated the dining room entirely. But neighbors say no one ever eats there with the lights off. Because one quiet family dinner became the moment everything ended. And the truth revealed itself one careless sentence at a time. When the body of Angela Morris was found behind the Riverside office complex, police assumed it was a random late-night attack. She was a 31-year-old accountant, working late during tax season. Her car was still in the parking garage. Her purse lay on the passenger seat. There were no obvious signs of robbery. What stood out immediately was timing. Angela had badged out of the building at 11:46 p.m. Security logs showed only one employee on duty at that hour, Caleb Norton, the overnight security guard. Caleb was cooperative from the start, calm, professional. He told officers he remembered seeing Angela leave. She looked tired, he said. I watched her walk toward her car. Everything seemed normal. He even pointed out the exact camera that would have captured her exit, but when detectives reviewed the footage, something didn't match. The camera angle Caleb described didn't show Angela at all. In fact, none of the cameras showed her leaving. What they did show was Caleb leaving his desk at 11:44 p.m., 2 minutes before Angela badged out, and not returning for nearly 20 minutes. When asked about the gap, he said the cameras sometimes glitched. Investigators checked the system logs. They didn't. Then came another detail. Angela's phone was found powered off in a dumpster 2 blocks away. Surveillance from a nearby store showed a uniformed security guard walking past the dumpster shortly after midnight. The uniform matched Caleb's. Detectives brought him in again. This time, they pressed harder. Caleb insisted he had only stepped out to smoke. Said he never spoke to Angela. Said he was being framed. But his story began to unravel when forensic analysts examined the security badge data more closely. Angela's badge had been used again, after her death, at 12:03 a.m., to access a restricted maintenance corridor. Only 2 people had permission for that area. One of them was Caleb. The corridor led to a service elevator. Rarely used at night. Inside the elevator, investigators found trace fibers matching Angela's clothing. The pressure mounted. A search warrant was issued for Caleb's apartment. Inside, detectives found Angela's keychain hidden in a drawer. Her hair strands were discovered on a jacket hanging in his closet, and on his laptop, they uncovered disturbing search history. How long before bruises fade, security cameras blind spots, can badge logs be edited? Confronted with the evidence, Caleb finally spoke. He claimed Angela had asked for help getting to her car. Said she trusted him because he worked there. He said they talked. He said she panicked. He said it was an accident. But the evidence told a different story. Prosecutors laid out a timeline showing he had disabled one camera temporarily, guided her through a restricted area, and attempted to hide what he had done using his access privileges. At trial, the phrase trusted access became central. The prosecution argued that Caleb didn't need force. He had authority, a uniform, a badge, a role that made people feel safe. The jury listened as footage, logs, and digital records reconstructed the final hour of Angela's life, minute by minute. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict came back. Guilty. Caleb Norton was sentenced to life in prison. The Riverside office complex replaced its entire security staff. New cameras were installed, policies were rewritten, but employees say they still hesitate when the elevators open late at night. Because the man who was supposed to protect them was the one who knew exactly how to make them disappear. When Daniel Foster walked into the police station just after dawn, he looked exhausted. "My wife didn't come home last night," he told the desk officer. "That's not like her." His wife, Rachel Foster, was 32, a marketing consultant who worked remotely and rarely went out late. According to Daniel, she had gone for an evening walk to clear her head after an argument, and never returned. He said he stayed up waiting. Police opened a missing person report immediately. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Rachel's phone was off. Her purse wasn't in the house. Her car was still in the driveway. No signs of forced entry, no note. But something about Daniel's behavior bothered the officers. He was calm. Too calm. He spoke in full, careful sentences. He corrected small details before being asked, and he kept repeating one line: "She just needed space." Detectives visited the house that afternoon. In the bedroom, Rachel's side of the closet was half full. Her favorite jacket was still there. Her medication sat untouched on the nightstand. She hadn't planned to go anywhere. When asked again about the argument, Daniel said it was nothing serious. But when pressed, his story shifted slightly, first about money, then about her mood, then about jealousy. Inconsistencies started stacking up. Police asked to see his car. Daniel hesitated. "It's messy," he said. "I haven't cleaned it." That wasn't a reason to refuse, but his hesitation was noted. When officers opened the trunk, they noticed a strong chemical smell. Inside was a large plastic storage bin, a folded tarp, and a pair of work gloves. Nothing illegal on its own, but unsettling. Then a technician noticed something darker along the edge of the trunk lining. Blood. Forensic testing confirmed it belonged to Rachel. Daniel was brought in for questioning again. This time the tone changed. He claimed Rachel must have cut herself earlier, suggested she'd been emotional, suggested she may have hurt herself, but investigators had already pulled GPS data from his vehicle. At 2:14 a.m., his car had driven to a remote service road outside town and stayed there for nearly 40 minutes. Search teams were sent to the location. Just beyond a line of trees, partially hidden by brush, they found disturbed soil. Rachel's body was buried shallowly beneath the ground. The medical examiner determined she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. When confronted with the evidence, Daniel's composure collapsed. He admitted they argued, admitted he lost control, claimed it was an accident, but prosecutors painted a different picture, one of anger, planning, and cleanup. They showed the jury the timeline, the argument, the late-night drive, the attempt to hide evidence, and the carefully rehearsed missing person report. One detail sealed his fate. During his first statement, Daniel had told police she never left the house. But her blood in the trunk proved he had moved her. At trial, Rachel's family listened as investigators described how Daniel had tried to play the role of the worried husband, while erasing evidence behind the scenes. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. Guilty. Daniel Foster was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Rachel's case is used in police training to illustrate a hard truth. Sometimes the person who reports someone missing already knows exactly where they are. For 12 years, the disappearance of Emily Parker haunted the town of Lakeshore. She was 21, a college student home for the summer, known for her laugh and her habit of leaving long voice messages instead of texts. One night, she went out to meet someone and never came back. Her car was found abandoned near the lake. Her phone was missing. There were no witnesses, no suspects, and no physical evidence. The case slowly went cold. Posters faded, leads dried up. Her parents kept her room exactly the same, hoping for answers that never came, until a forgotten voicemail changed everything. In 2024, the police department began digitizing old evidence using updated audio recovery software. Among the archived files was a corrupted voicemail, labeled only with Emily's name, and a timestamp from the night she disappeared. It had never been playable before. Now it was. When investigators pressed play, they heard static at first. Then Emily's voice. She sounded nervous but calm, like she was trying not to panic. "Hey, I'm on my way now. I just wanted to say if anything weird happens, it's probably because of..." The message cut out, but in the background, faint and distorted, another voice could be heard. A man's voice, and he was saying her name. At first it was impossible to tell who it belonged to, but audio analysts isolated the sound and cleaned it up. What emerged was a single clear phrase: "Emily, don't do this." The tone wasn't angry. It was familiar. Investigators compared the voice to old recordings connected to the case. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. One match stood out. Jason Miller, Emily's former boyfriend. He had been questioned years earlier and cleared. He claimed he hadn't spoken to Emily in months, and said he was out of town the night she disappeared. But that alibi was built on the testimony of one person, his cousin. Detectives revisited the file. Jason's cousin admitted he had lied. He had been covering for him. At the time, he was scared and didn't want to ruin his life. With that admission, the case reopened fully. Police obtained a warrant to search Jason's old storage unit, which he had kept rented for over a decade. Inside were boxes of junk, old furniture, and one sealed container labeled tools. Inside the container, investigators found Emily's phone. It still worked, and it still contained the sent voicemail. GPS metadata embedded in the file placed the recording near a remote lakeside trail, not where her car had been found. Search teams returned to the area, less than half a mile from the trailhead, beneath a cluster of trees. Ground-penetrating radar detected disturbed soil. Human remains were recovered and later confirmed to be Emily Parker. The autopsy revealed she had died the same night she disappeared. When confronted with the evidence, Jason initially denied everything. Then he claimed Emily had overreacted during an argument. He said she threatened to expose him. He said things got out of control. The voicemail destroyed his defense. Prosecutors played it in court, the final moments before her death. The courtroom was silent, as Emily's voice filled the speakers. Her parents held hands. The jury needed less than 2 hours. Jason Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Today, Emily's voicemail is preserved as evidence, not just of a crime, but of a voice that refused to disappear. Her family says it best. She spoke once more, when she couldn't speak anymore. And that's how the truth finally came out, on a warm summer night, the residents of Maple Court Apartments heard screaming. Not once, not briefly, but for nearly 10 minutes. Doors stayed closed, curtains stayed drawn. Some people turned up their TVs. Others told themselves it was just an argument, none of their business. By morning, 24-year-old Hannah Cole was dead. She lived alone in apartment 3B. Friendly, quiet, recently moved in. She worked long shifts at a daycare and often came home late. Neighbors knew her face, not her life. At 11:47 p.m., multiple tenants heard shouting coming from her unit. A woman yelling "Stop!", a loud crash, then screaming. Sharp, panicked, desperate. One neighbor later admitted she picked up her phone, then set it down. "I didn't want to get involved," she said. At 12:02 a.m., everything went silent. The next morning, Hannah didn't show up for work. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By afternoon, her sister called police. Officers entered apartment 3B and immediately knew something was wrong. Furniture was overturned. A lamp lay shattered. There were drag marks across the carpet. Blood was smeared on the wall near the bedroom doorway. Hannah was not there. The investigation moved fast. Detectives interviewed every resident. Many admitted hearing the screams. Some said they assumed it was a couple arguing. Others said they were scared. One person stood out, Kyle Benton, who lived directly across the hall. He told police he'd heard nothing unusual, but security footage contradicted him. Cameras showed Kyle stepping into the hallway during the time of the screams. He stood outside his door for early 30 seconds, listening. Then he went back inside. Phone records placed him awake and active during the incident. Police also learned something else. Kyle had been messaging Hannah for weeks. At first, the messages were friendly, then persistent, then uncomfortable. When she stopped replying, the tone changed. "You think you're better than me? Don't ignore me. I hear you walking around at night." When questioned, Kyle said he was just joking and claimed Hannah misunderstood. But investigators found more. A maintenance worker reported seeing Kyle in Hannah's hallway earlier that evening, claiming he had a leak to check. He didn't. A search warrant was issued. Inside Kyle's apartment, police found Hannah's phone hidden under a mattress. Her keys were in a kitchen drawer. And in the bathroom, traces of blood were found matching hers. Still, Hannah herself was missing. Search dogs were brought in. They tracked a scent trail from the apartment complex to a wooded drainage area behind the parking lot. There, under discarded plywood and trash bags, they found her. The autopsy revealed she died from blunt force trauma and suffocation. When confronted, Kyle finally admitted he had gone to her apartment to talk. He claimed she yelled that neighbors would think it was a fight, and that he panicked. He said something chilling. "I didn't think anyone would help her anyway." At trial, prosecutors focused not only on the murder, but on the silence that surrounded it. Multiple witnesses testified that they heard screaming and chose not to call police. The jury heard the 911 system logs. No calls were made from the building that night. Kyle Benton was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. After the case, the city launched a campaign urging residents to report suspected violence, even if unsure. A plaque now hangs near the entrance of Maple Court with Hannah's name on it. It reads, "If you hear someone asking for help, be their voice, because one call could have changed everything." When 6-year-old Evan Miller handed his teacher a crayon drawing, no one expected it to reopen a closed investigation. The picture showed a stick figure lying on the ground. Another taller figure stood nearby, colored in dark red. Behind them was a square shape with a big X on it. At the top, Evan had written in uneven letters, "This is where Mommy sleeps." The teacher froze. Evan's mother, Rachel Miller, had been reported missing 8 months earlier. Police had ruled it a voluntary disappearance after her husband, Todd Miller, claimed she left during an argument and never came back. There was no body, no forced entry, no clear evidence of a crime. The case had gone cold, but the drawing changed everything. The school counselor gently asked Evan what the picture meant. He pointed to the dark figure. "That's Daddy," he said quietly. Then he pointed to the box shape. "That's the floor." The counselor immediately contacted Child Services and police. Detectives reopened the case and interviewed Evan with a child specialist present. He described, in simple words, a night when his parents argued. He said his mom fell down and didn't wake up. He said his dad told him not to talk about it or bad things would happen. Most chilling of all, Evan said his mom was under the house. Police obtained a warrant. The Millers' home sat on a concrete slab foundation. No basement, no crawl space, at least not one on the original blueprints. But ground-penetrating radar revealed something unusual beneath the laundry room. A rectangular disturbance. Investigators cut into the concrete. Beneath it was a shallow cavity, carefully sealed. Inside were human remains. Dental records confirmed they belonged to Rachel Miller, the medical examiner determined she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Todd Miller was arrested that evening. At first he denied everything. Claimed his son was confused. Said the drawing was imagination. But when detectives showed him photos of the excavation site, his composure broke. He admitted that he and Rachel had argued. He claimed she fell. He said he panicked, but evidence told a different story. Rachel's phone records showed she had been planning to leave. She had spoken to a friend about taking Evan and staying elsewhere. Financial records showed Todd had recently taken out a large life insurance policy in her name. During the trial, prosecutors displayed Evan's drawing on a large screen. The courtroom fell silent. Experts testified that children often express trauma through art, long before they can explain it in words. The jury deliberated just over 2 hours. Todd Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Evan was placed with relatives and began therapy. Years later, he would say he didn't understand at the time why he drew that picture, only that it felt important. Today, that drawing is sealed as evidence, a reminder that truth doesn't always come from witnesses or confessions. Sometimes it comes from a child holding a crayon, trying to explain something no one else was willing to see. When the front desk at the Silvercrest Hotel received a call about a guest who hadn't checked out, no one expected anything unusual. Room 417 had been booked for 3 nights by Aaron Blake, a traveling sales representative. Checkout time passed. Housekeeping knocked. No answer. When staff finally unlocked the door, the room looked flawless. Too flawless. The bed was perfectly made. Towels folded with precision. Trash emptied. Not a single wrinkle out of place. It looked like no one had ever slept there. But something felt wrong. The bathroom floor was still slightly damp. The trash bag inside the bin had been replaced with a fresh liner. And there was a sharp chemical smell hanging in the air. Housekeeping reported it to management, who called police for a welfare check. Officers arrived expecting to find an abandoned room. Instead, they found a carefully erased one. There were no personal items, no clothes, no toiletries, no luggage, except for one thing. A single women's earring wedged beneath the edge of the nightstand. The room had been rented to one man, but the earring didn't belong to him. Hotel key records showed something interesting. 2 key cards had been used repeatedly late at night, even though only one guest was registered. Security footage revealed a woman entering the hotel with Aaron on the first night. She never appeared on camera leaving. Police released a still image from the footage, asking for help identifying her. Within hours, a call came in. The woman was Lydia Chen, a graduate student reported missing 3 days earlier. Her family said she had gone to meet someone she met online. She had sent one final message to her sister, going to meet him. Hotel downtown. Should be quick. That message ended the search for where and began the search for what happened. Detectives focused on the room again. Luminol testing revealed extensive cleanup, not just in the bathroom, but across the carpet, bed frame, and even the walls. Someone had scrubbed the room thoroughly but unevenly, too carefully. The hotel's plumbing system was inspected next. In the main drain connected to room 417, technicians found traces of biological material consistent with Lydia's DNA. Aaron Blake was located 2 states away and arrested during a traffic stop. In his car were latex gloves, heavy-duty cleaning supplies, and a burner phone. During questioning, he claimed Lydia left early. Said he cleaned the room because he liked things tidy. Said he had no idea what happened to her. But investigators had more. Cell data placed his phone in the hotel room long after he claimed to be asleep. Security footage showed him leaving the building multiple times overnight carrying bags. One camera captured him disposing of something into a commercial dumpster behind a closed restaurant. Search crews recovered items from that dumpster, including Lydia's bag. Further forensic work revealed microscopic fibers from the hotel carpet on Aaron's clothing. The final piece came from a hotel maintenance log. The day after checkout, Aaron had requested an emergency deep cleaning, specifically asking that no one else enter the room. That request alone raised red flags. At trial, prosecutors described the room as not clean, but erased. They showed photos of the pristine surfaces beside forensic images revealing what had been scrubbed away. The jury listened in silence, as Lydia's final message was read aloud. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict: guilty. Aaron Blake was sentenced to life in prison. The Silvercrest Hotel renovated the room entirely. New walls, new floors, new furniture, but staff say room 417 is still avoided, because sometimes the cleanest places hide the darkest truths. When Marissa Cole missed her usual nightly check-in text, her sister knew something was wrong. Marissa was careful, predictable. She worked late at a downtown restaurant and always messaged when she was safely on her way home. That night, the message never came. At first, friends assumed her phone had died. By morning, panic had set in. Her car was still parked behind the restaurant, her purse was inside, her jacket was gone. Security footage showed her leaving the back entrance at 11:18 p.m., pulling her coat tighter as she stepped into the cold. Then a car rolled up Basie. It wasn't a rideshare. The vehicle was an older dark sedan with no visible markings. The driver leaned over and spoke to her through the open window. After a brief hesitation, Marissa nodded and got in. That moment became the center of the investigation. Police released the footage to the public. Tips flooded in. Several people thought the driver looked familiar. One tip stood out. A coworker recognized the car as belonging to Ethan Rowe, a delivery driver who often waited near closing time. He had offered coworkers rides before. Always friendly, always polite. Police questioned Ethan the next day. He said he gave Marissa a ride home because it was cold. Said he dropped her off safely. Said he was just being helpful. But when asked for the address where he dropped her off, he hesitated. He gave the wrong street. Surveillance cameras along the route showed his car heading in the opposite direction. Detectives obtained a warrant to search his vehicle. Inside, they found a strand of hair caught in the seat seam. Forensic testing later confirmed it belonged to Marissa. Still, there was no sign of her. Phone data provided the next lead. Marissa's phone had briefly connected to a cell tower near an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town before going dark. Search teams were sent to the area, behind the warehouse, partially concealed by overgrown weeds. They found disturbed ground and personal items belonging to Marissa. Her body was recovered nearby. The autopsy confirmed she had been killed shortly after entering the car. When confronted with the evidence, Ethan's story unraveled. He admitted he had offered her a ride, claimed she misunderstood his intentions, claimed things got out of control. Investigators later uncovered messages on his phone sent to other women he had offered rides to, some friendly, some unsettling. A pattern of behavior emerged at TRIA. Prosecutors focused on trust. They showed the jury the security footage of Marissa hesitating before getting into the car, a moment that lasted only seconds but changed everything. They showed the texts, the location data, the hair evidence, and finally, they played the voicemail Marissa had started recording, accidentally, just as she entered the vehicle. Her voice was calm at first, then uncertain, then cut off. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Ethan Rowe was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Today, Marissa's family works with local organizations to promote safe ride awareness and late-night transportation programs. They remind people of a painful truth. Danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks like a polite stranger offering help. And a ride you should never take. When Natalie Brooks, a 22-year-old graduate student, failed to show up for her Monday seminar, no one panicked at first. Graduate students missed class sometimes. Deadlines piled up. Sleep disappeared. Life happened. But by the third day, concern turned into fear. Natalie hadn't answered texts. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her roommate reported her missing after finding her backpack still by the door and her laptop open on the desk, mid-sentence. Campus police opened an investigation, assuming she had left town suddenly. That theory collapsed almost immediately. Natalie's bank account hadn't been touched. Her ID and passport were still in her room, and her calendar showed a reminder written in bold letters the night before she vanished. Meeting with Prof H, 8:30 p.m. The time stood out. Faculty meetings didn't happen that late. The professor listed, Dr. Alan Hargreave, was a respected senior lecturer in the sociology department, married, published, well-liked, known for mentoring students. When questioned, he said Natalie had asked for academic advice and stopped by his office briefly earlier that evening. He insisted she left around 7:45 p.m. Security footage told a different story. Cameras outside the academic building showed Natalie entering at 8:27 p.m. She never appeared leaving. Another camera showed Dr. Hargreave locking the building at 9:14 p.m. alone. When asked about the discrepancy, he said the cameras were often wrong. Investigators didn't agree. They pulled keycard data. Dr. Hargreave's access card had been used to open a restricted faculty storage corridor at 9:18 p.m., a space students weren't allowed to enter. That corridor led to an old service elevator rarely used anymore. A K-9 unit alerted strongly near its doors. Police obtained a warrant to search the professor's office and nearby storage areas. Behind a movable bookshelf in the storage corridor, they discovered a concealed maintenance hatch that didn't appear on modern building plans. Inside was a narrow utility shaft. At the bottom, wrapped in plastic and fabric, were human remains. Dental records confirmed they belonged to Natalie. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma. The case shook the university. Students protested. Faculty were stunned. Alumni demanded answers. Investigators dug deeper into Dr. Hargreave's past and uncovered a disturbing pattern. Several former students had filed informal complaints years earlier. Claims of inappropriate messages, pressure during office hours, and intimidation. None had gone forward officially. Natalie had recently contacted the department chair requesting a meeting about serious concerns. Her last email draft, never sent, was recovered from her laptop. "I'm scared of how he reacts when I say no." Phone records showed she had exchanged messages with Dr. Hargreave shortly before her disappearance. The final message from him read, "Come by tonight. We need to settle this." When confronted, he denied everything at first, then claimed she slipped and fell, then said he panicked, but the evidence was overwhelming. At trial, prosecutors walked the jury through the timeline minute by minute, keycard logs, camera footage, digital messages, and forensic findings from the hidden shaft. They described how authority and access had been used as weapons. The jury deliberated less than a day. Dr. Alan Hargreave was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The university later removed his name from all records and established a new reporting system for misconduct. Students now pass the building every day without knowing what once hid behind its walls. But those who remember Natalie say her courage, even in her final hours, forced the truth into the light. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets aren't hidden far away. They're hidden behind respected titles and locked office doors. When police arrived at apartment 9C, the door was locked from the inside. That alone should have made the scene impossible. Inside, Victor Hale, a 41-year-old financial consultant, lay dead on the living room floor. There was no sign of forced entry, no weapon, no open windows, no one else inside. Yet he had been murdered. The call had come from downstairs neighbors who heard a loud crash followed by silence. When officers forced entry, they found Victor lying on his back, a deep wound to his chest. The apartment was tidy, almost too tidy. At first glance it looked like an accident, but the medical examiner disagreed. Victor hadn't fallen. He had been stabbed. The problem? There was no knife. The doors were still locked from the inside, the deadbolt engaged, windows sealed, fire escape untouched. It was a classic locked room mystery, except it was real. Detectives began by reconstructing Victor's final hours. He had hosted dinner that evening with 3 people, his co-worker Liam Brooks, his neighbor Sophia Trent, and his former girlfriend Claire Novak. All 3 confirmed they left around 9:30 p.m. Victor was pronounced dead at 10:12. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving after 9:31. So how did someone kill him? The autopsy revealed a crucial detail. The wound was deep but unusually clean, narrow, precise. and showing almost no tearing. The medical examiner noted that the weapon was likely thin, rigid, and non-metallic. That detail changed everything. Detectives searched the apartment again, this time ignoring knives. Instead, they noticed something broken in the kitchen trash, a snapped plastic skewer, the kind used for cocktails. The tip was missing. Forensics tested the wound depth against the skewer's diameter. It matched. But how could someone stab a man with a flimsy plastic stick hard enough to kill him, and then make it disappear? The answer was chillingly simple. The skewer had been frozen. Investigators found an ice tray in Victor's freezer with one slot missing. Meltwater pooled beneath it. The freezer temperature logs showed it had recently been opened. A frozen plastic skewer, sharpened slightly, could penetrate tissue, then melt afterward, leaving no weapon. But who did it? Attention returned to the dinner guests. Security footage showed something subtle. When Claire Novak left the apartment, she was holding a small insulated bag, the kind used to carry cold items. She had told police it contained leftovers. When questioned again, she admitted bringing dessert, ice cream. But she couldn't explain why the container she carried out was empty when later examined. Phone records revealed heated messages between Victor and Claire in the days before his death. He had threatened to expose her for embezzlement at their former company. She had begged him to stop. That night, during dinner, witnesses said the two argued quietly in the kitchen while the others were in the living room. Investigators reconstructed the timeline. Claire had prepared the frozen weapon ahead of time, hidden inside the insulated bag. During the argument, she struck Victor once, fast, precise, then returned to the table as if nothing happened. The wound bled internally. Victor collapsed minutes later, after everyone had left. By the time police arrived, the weapon had melted completely. A perfect crime, almost. Freezer logs, security footage, text messages, and residue from melted plastic found in the wound sealed her fate. At trial, prosecutors called it a murder designed to vanish. The jury didn't buy the illusion. Claire Novak was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The case became infamous among forensic students, proof that even the most impossible crimes leave traces, because no matter how clever the method, the truth always finds a way out. The ballroom was still decorated when police arrived. White roses lined the walls. Gold ribbons hung from the chairs. A just married banner sagged slightly above the dance floor. Guests had left only hours earlier, laughing, hugging, promising to stay in touch. But in the honeymoon suite upstairs, something had gone terribly wrong. At 2:36 a.m., hotel security received a call from a shaken man claiming his new wife was unconscious. When officers arrived, they found Emily Carter, 27, lying on the bedroom floor. She was unresponsive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her husband of less than 12 hours, Jason Carter, sat on the bed with his head in his hands, repeating the same sentence. "I don't understand. We were so happy." At first, everything pointed to a tragic medical emergency. Emily had complained of being tired during the reception. She had barely eaten. Some guests even remembered her looking dizzy. But the autopsy told a different story. Emily had not died of natural causes. The medical examiner found signs of poisoning. The discovery stunned both families. Jason insisted he had no idea how poison could have entered her system. He said they'd shared cake, champagne, and room service. Nothing unusual, but investigators began to notice inconsistencies. Room service records showed only one drink had been ordered after midnight, a single glass of champagne, requested by Jason. Security footage showed him receiving it alone in the hallway. He later claimed Emily drank from it, but toxicology results showed the substance used had a bitter taste that would have been immediately noticeable. Unless it was masked, the wedding cake was tested next. One slice, Emily's, contained trace amounts of the same poison. The rest were clean. Attention turned to motive. Financial investigators uncovered something disturbing. Jason had taken out a large life insurance policy on Emily just 6 weeks before the wedding. He was the sole beneficiary. When questioned about it, he said it was just planning for the future. Then came the emails. Police recovered deleted messages from Jason's laptop showing conversations with a former partner, discussing money problems and how marriage fixes everything. Another message sent just days before the wedding read, "After tonight, it'll all be taken care of." When confronted, Jason's story changed repeatedly. He claimed the poison must have been an accident. Then he suggested Emily might have taken something herself. Finally, he stopped talking altogether. At trial, prosecutors laid out the timeline minute by minute, the insurance policy, the poisoned cake, the solitary drink order, and the digital trail of messages. They showed how Jason had prepared everything carefully, choosing a method meant to look like a sudden medical collapse during a stressful day. But one detail ruined his plan. The hotel's kitchen camera had captured him opening the cake box earlier that evening when no one was around. That footage, combined with the toxicology results, sealed the case. The jury deliberated for just over 3 hours. Jason Carter was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The wedding photos were never released publicly. But hotel staff say the suite where it happened remains unused. A reminder that even the happiest celebrations can hide the darkest intentions. And that sometimes, the most dangerous vows are the ones spoken in secret. He waved every morning, helped carry groceries, fixed broken fences without being asked. When new families moved in, Mark was usually the first to knock with a smile and a plate of cookies. That's why no one questioned it when he offered to help Rachel win, a 29-year-old graduate student who had just moved in next door. He helped her set up her Wi-Fi, fixed a loose cabinet, even offered to watch her place when she traveled. She thanked him politely, and kept her distance. But over time, Rachel began to feel watched. Small things started to feel wrong. Items shifted slightly. Her bedroom door sometimes felt harder to open. Once she noticed her laptop camera light flicker for a second, then go dark. She brushed it off, until one night her friend noticed something strange during a video call. "Why is there a red light behind you?" her friend asked. Rachel turned around. There was nothing there. But later that night, she searched her apartment carefully. Behind a smoke detector in the corner of her bedroom, she found a tiny hole. Inside was a hidden camera. Terrified, Rachel called police immediately. Officers removed the device and traced its wiring through the wall, directly into Mark's townhouse next door. A search warrant was issued within hours. Inside Mark's home, investigators found a hidden monitoring setup, multiple screens, hard drives, and cables feeding from several nearby apartments. Rachel's unit wasn't the only one. There were hours of recordings. Most were silent. Some showed private moments no one had consented to share. And worse, folders labeled with names. When confronted, Mark claimed it was just curiosity, said he never meant harm, said he liked feeling connected. But forensic analysts uncovered something darker. Search history revealed obsessive behavior focused on Rachel, her schedule, her habits, her routines, notes about when she was home alone, when lights went out, when she slept. Then they found messages he had written but never sent. "She doesn't see how close we already are. She trusts me. She will understand one day." Police expanded the investigation. Hidden cameras were discovered in 2 other nearby apartments, both belonging to women who lived alone. One former tenant came forward, shaking, to say she had always felt watched but never knew why. Another said she had moved suddenly after hearing noises in her walls at night. Mark was arrested and charged with multiple counts of illegal surveillance, stalking, and invasion of privacy. But the case took a darker turn. On one of the hard drives, detectives found a folder labeled Plan. Inside were floor sketches of Rachel's apartment, notes about her routines, and a list of dates, future dates. Authorities said the documents suggested escalation. At trial, prosecutors argued that the cameras were not curiosity, they were preparation. Rachel testified behind a privacy screen, her voice shaking but steady. She described the moment she realized her life had been watched without her consent. "How safe." "Did you feel in your own home?" the prosecutor asked. "Not safe at all," she replied. "It felt like my home was never mine." The jury deliberated less than a day. Mark Ellison was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to decades in prison. The apartment complex removed all internal wiring, installed security inspections, and changed ownership shortly after. Rachel later moved away, but she spoke publicly once, saying, "People think danger looks loud or angry. Sometimes it looks helpful, sometimes it smiles," and that was the lesson the neighborhood never forgot. When Lily Hart, a 19-year-old college freshman, vanished from her dorm room, police assumed she had run away. There were no signs of struggle. Her phone was gone. Her backpack was missing. Her roommate said Lily had been quiet lately, distracted, thinking a lot. At first, the case barely made the news. But Lily's mother didn't believe the runaway theory for a second. She wrote everything down, she told detectives. Everything. That single sentence changed the investigation. Police returned to Lily's dorm room for a deeper search. Inside her desk drawer, tucked beneath notebooks and old receipts, they found a small purple diary. At first glance, it looked harmless. Doodles, class notes, random thoughts. But halfway through, the tone shifted. The handwriting grew tighter. The entries shorter and darker. He keeps showing up where I am. I didn't tell anyone my schedule. I think he knows my room. Detectives realized Lily believed she was being followed. The diary mentioned one name repeatedly, Professor Daniel Cross. He taught her introductory psychology course. At first, the connection seemed unlikely. Cross was respected, married, and well-liked by students. He had taught at the university for over 15 years, but Lily's entries told another story. She wrote about late-night emails that fell. T2 personal. Comments about her appearance. Invitations to talk privately after class. A meeting she regretted. One entry stopped detectives cold. If anything happens to me, look at his office computer. Police obtained a warrant. Professor Cross appeared calm when questioned. He said Lily was troubled, claimed she misunderstood his mentorship, said he hadn't seen her in days. But digital forensics told a different story. His office computer contained deleted folders labeled with students' names. Inside were photos, screenshots of emails, and typed notes tracking movements and schedules. One folder was labeled LH. The metadata showed activity late on the night Lily disappeared. Security footage placed Cross near the dorm building after midnight, a place he had no reason to be. Then came the breakthrough. A campus maintenance worker reported a locked storage room in the old science wing that no one used anymore. It had recently been accessed using a faculty master key. Inside, investigators found a suitcase. Inside the suitcase were clothes matching what Lily had been wearing the night she disappeared, and beneath them her body. The autopsy showed she had died the same night she vanished. Confronted with the diary, the computer evidence, and surveillance footage, Cross finally spoke. He claimed Lily had misunderstood his intentions, claimed she became emotional, claimed things went too far. The jury didn't need long. Prosecutors read excerpts from Lily's diary aloud in court. Her fear, her confusion, her attempt to protect herself with words. The courtroom was silent. Daniel Cross was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. After the trial, the university overhauled its reporting system and created anonymous complaint channels. Lily's diary was returned to her family. Her mother later said, she wrote the truth when no one else would listen. In the end, her words spoke for her. When police arrived at the quiet suburban home just after midnight, Aaron Price was sitting on the front steps, shaking. Inside, his roommate Kevin Moore, 29, lay dead on the kitchen floor. Aaron immediately raised his hands and said the same thing over and over. He came at me. I had to defend myself. At first glance, the scene supported his claim. A kitchen knife lay near Kevin's body. A chair was overturned. There were signs of a struggle. Self-defense seemed possible, but timelines don't lie. Officers noticed something small that didn't fit. The blood had begun to dry in uneven patterns, suggesting the body had been moved, and the knife, supposedly dropped during the struggle, was almost too clean. Aaron was taken in for questioning. He stuck to his story. Said Kevin had been angry, threatening. Said he grabbed the knife to protect himself. Said everything happened so fast. Then investigators began reconstructing the night. Security footage from a nearby convenience store showed Kevin alive and calm at 9:12 p.m., buying snacks. He sent a text to a friend at 9:18 saying, "Heading home. All good." But Aaron told police the fight started at 8:45. That alone raised alarms. Phone data placed Aaron's phone at the house until 10:30 p.m., contradicting his claim that he called police immediately after the incident. So, what happened during those missing hours? The kitchen told the story. Forensic analysis showed two distinct cleanup attempts. one shortly after the fatal injury, wiping blood from the counter, and another much later, when blood had already begun to dry. There were also drag marks leading from the kitchen to the hallway, then back again. Kevin hadn't died where he was found. Then came the autopsy. The medical examiner concluded Kevin died from a single stab wound to the back, delivered at an angle inconsistent with a face-to-face struggle. Even more damaging, defensive wounds were absent. Kevin hadn't been attacking anyone. The knife handle was examined closely. No fingerprints except Aaron's. But the final blow came from digital evidence. Aaron's phone contained deleted search queries from earlier that evening. How to clean blood fast. How long before blood dries. Self-defense laws stabbing. The timestamps showed the searches were made before he called 911. When detectives confronted him with this, Aaron's story unraveled. He claimed he was scared. Said Kevin had threatened him earlier in the week. Said he panicked. Said he didn't mean to kill him. But prosecutors focused on the timeline. The hours of delay, the cleanup attempts, the staged scene. At trial, they played the 911 call. Aaron's voice trembled, but experts testified that the delay between the time of death and the call showed calculation, not panic. The defense argued fear. The prosecution argued planning. The jury agreed with the prosecution. After just 3 hours of deliberation, Aaron Price was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The Cass. Became a training example for investigators, showing how timelines, not stories, expose the truth, because lies can sound convincing. But time never lies. When Jordan Wells reported his girlfriend missing, he seemed genuinely scared. He arrived at the station just before dawn, eyes red, voice shaking. He said Maya Thompson, 27, hadn't come home after meeting friends. He claimed he waited all night before calling police because he didn't want to overreact. At first, everything sounded reasonable. Maya's phone was off. Her car was found parked near a coffee shop downtown. Her purse was inside. No sign of a struggle. Officers labeled it a missing person case, but one detail didn't sit right. Jordan told police Maya had left the apartment at 9 p.m., wearing a black jacket and jeans. Security footage from their apartment complex showed something different. Maya never left. At 8:47 p.m., she entered the building. She was alone. She never came back out. When detectives asked Jordan about this, he frowned and said the cameras must be wrong. They weren't. Investigators pulled his phone records next. Jordan claimed he spent the night calling Maya, worried she wasn't answering, but phone logs showed no outgoing calls until after 2:30 a.m. Instead, his phone showed long periods of inactivity, followed by short bursts of movement. GPS data placed him at a wooded access road outside town between 11:10 p.m. and 12:05 a.m. When asked why, Jordan said he went for a drive to clear his head. That was the first lie. Then came the second. He told detectives he hadn't touched Maya's phone, but technicians found his fingerprint on the back of it, placed there after her last known activity. The small lies began stacking up. A search warrant was issued for their apartment. In the bathroom trash, investigators found paper towels stained with diluted blood. In the washing machine, damp clothes that had just been run through a quick cycle. Forensic tests confirmed the blood belonged to Maya. Still, she hadn't been found. The breakthrough came when a park ranger reported disturbed soil near the same wooded road Jordan's phone had visited. Search teams uncovered a shallow grave. Maya's body was inside. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death blunt force, trauma to the head. When confronted, Jordan finally broke. He said they had argued, said she wanted to leave, said he lost control for a moment. He claimed he panicked afterward and didn't know what else to do. Prosecutors focused on the lies, not the argument, not the emotions, but the choices made after the fake timeline, the delayed call, the phone manipulation, the cleanup. Each lie narrowed the truth until there was nowhere left to hide. At trial, jurors heard Jordan's first statement side by side with surveillance footage and phone data. The contrast was devastating. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict for second-degree murder. Jordan Wells was sentenced to life in prison. Detectives later said the case was solved not by a dramatic confession or a dramatic clue, but by one small lie that didn't match the evidence. Because in the end, lies don't disappear. They multiply, and eventually they point straight back to the person who told them. For nearly 15 years, the disappearance of Sarah Whitmore was considered unsolvable. She was 25, newly engaged, and working at a local real estate office when she vanished on her way home one evening. Her car was found parked neatly outside her apartment. Her purse sat on the passenger seat. Her phone was gone. There were no signs of violence, no witnesses, no suspects. Police searched for months, then years. Eventually, the case file was boxed, labeled cold, and pushed into storage. Life moved on. But Sarah's mother never stopped asking questions. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, she called the police department and asked the same thing. Has anyone looked at her case again? For 14 years, the answer was no, until a newly assigned detective, Marcus Hale, decided to reopen old unsolved files as part of a cold case review. When he pulled Sarah's file, one thing immediately bothered him. Her phone had never been recovered. That wasn't unusual. Until he noticed something strange in the original notes. Her phone provider had logged one outgoing voicemail 2 days after she vanished. The message had been corrupted and dismissed at the time as a system error. With newer technology, Hale requested the audio be restored. What came back changed everything. The voicemail was only 6 seconds long. At first it sounded like static, then a woman's shaky breathing, then 3 words barely audible. He knows I know. The timestamp showed it was sent at 2:14 a.m., 2 days after Sarah had supposedly disappeared, which meant she had been alive, at least then. Investigators dug deeper into phone tower data from that night. The signal bounced off a rural tower nearly 30 miles outside town, an area never searched. The land belonged to a man named Thomas Reed, a former co-worker of Sarah's. At the time of her disappearance, Thomas had been questioned briefly and cleared. He claimed he barely knew her. But emails recovered from an old company server told a different story. Sarah had complained to HR about Thomas shortly before she vanished. She accused him of harassment and said she planned to escalate the complaint. That report was never filed properly. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Thomas's rural property. Behind an old shed, ground-penetrating radar detected disturbed soil. Buried beneath several feet of earth were human remains. NTL records confirmed they belonged to Sarah Whitmore. The autopsy revealed she had been held for days before she died. Investigators confronted Thomas with the evidence. At first, he denied everything. Then he claimed Sarah came to his property voluntarily. Then he said she got scared. Then he stopped talking. But the voicemail destroyed his defense. Experts testified that the voice belonged to Sarah. The timing matched the tower pings near his land. The phrase "he knows I know" aligned with her HR complaint. The jury needed less than an hour. Thomas Reed was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. At sentencing, the judge addressed Sarah's family directly. This case was nearly forgotten, he said. But truth has patience. Today, Sarah's case is taught in cold case units across the country. Proof that evidence doesn't expire. And justice doesn't either. Her mother later said something that investigators still quote, "They told me to let it go. But I knew the truth was still out there, waiting for someone to listen." And after 15 years of silence, it finally was.